Yeah.
We are Zoom webinar. This is our first Zoom webinar. We're doing it limited just to our friends and limited experience here to test it out. So you guys snuck in or got the exclusive invite. So I'm glad you were all able to show up. I think this is gonna be a lot of fun. I've met some of you, so it's good to kind of see some of the familiar names and remember the faces. Thanks, Scott, for wearing the vintage T-shirt. I'm gonna take everyone through in a couple of moments here. Take everyone through just a couple of slides on how we think about Soapbox, internally, so that we're all kind of starting from the same page, and then just a very high level basic demo. I mean, everyone on this webinar has been using Soapbox for a bit, so we'll skip some of the basics, but a high level demo here of how we use the tool internally. And my goal is to just show you the honest truth, right? So I have a little demo environment set up, but Hiba has also graciously given the thumbs up to explore her one-on-one as well. So you can see the real inners of how we work here. And then, as Hiba was saying, like, we want to make this as interactive as possible and genuinely mean it when we want to have like a conversation with all of you. So, chats like crazy, Q&As like crazy, and happy to take it wherever you guys want to take it, past the basics. And last thing I'll say is, like, try to throw me off here. I don't know. Scott's probably the only one who's going to like truly challenge himself over the next hour to throw me off. But do your best to come up with some questions. I'll be as honest as possible.
And if there are any specific features you want us to walk through, we can also do that. Basically treat this as a full tutorial. And yeah.
Cool. I think we go for it. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I think worth starting off. I promise you I'm not going to kill you with slides here. I've got like 5 slides. Before we start, is the recording going to be available, Hiba?
Yes.
Okay.
It's recording. Yes, we can make this available.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
So before we go into it, here, just some quick introductions. You see our faces up here. I'm Brennan, CEO, co-founder of Soapbox. I've probably met some of you, but my role is all over the place, from customer success, support, sales, marketing, product, sometimes some engineering when the team lets me, although they don't let me very much anymore. But excited to be here and kind of keep the conversation alive with all of you here today, and just share how we manage our team using our own tool. I'll pass it over to Hiba, but if you want to follow along the journey, Hiba and I have a lot of fun on Twitter, so feel free to click the follow buttons.
Yeah, so I'm Hiba. I run marketing at Soapbox. So you probably, if you're on the email list, get an email from me at least once a week with all of the hits of the blog, as well as just what's trending within Soapbox and usage. So feel free to reach out anytime. I'd love to chat. And yeah.
Cool. Okay, so all of you know Soapbox, what it is, how it works. We like to think of it as a tool to really help you build and maintain a high-performing team, but without the admin work, right? So while there might be, a ton of administrative tools and things that you feel like someone is telling you have to do, we kind of want to cut through all of that and just focus on how do we get your team productive, engaged, aligned, happy, and moving forward. So I'm going to take you through how we do that at Soapbox, but there's a couple of core pieces, I would say, to I think what makes Soapbox special in relation to a whole bunch of other ways of maybe accomplishing a similar thing. most of you have experienced, or I'm going to assume here that everyone has experienced the meetings portion of it. And I think that's the most special part. But when we think of building high performing teams at work, to me, it kind of comes at the intersection of three core components. The first is your core priorities. What are the rocks? What are the OKRs? What are the goals that your team needs to hit? And obviously, at work, we're all at work for a reason. We all have a purpose and goal that we need to achieve. In some degree, being a high performing team means, compared to the average team, you hit your goals more frequently. So I think step one is, what are those goals, and are we hitting them, and are we trending towards them, and how can we as a business help you enable your team to hit them more frequently than others? The second piece, and I think what most have experienced with Soapbox, is the weekly actions, right? What are the routines, the cadences? In a way, I think of this as the metabolism of your team or your business. What are the routines and meetings that exist on your calendar that can kind of set the pace and be used as those moments to kind of flex your managerial might to make sure things are on track, or make sure you're understanding the problems and blockers that exist within your business. So I think that's kind of component number two. And component number three, we've all experienced this, right? Morale and motivation of your team. If you have, kind of almost goes without saying, if you have a sales team, say, that is motivated and has high morale, they're probably going to hit their quarterly goals, right? If you have an engineering team that's amped up and excited about the features they're working on, they're probably going to do a better job. It's almost, doesn't need to be mentioned, except the fact that I think in our own experiences, as we've gone through work, we've felt motivation and morale kind of come and go. And so you kind of know the downsides of it. If you're demotivated, if there's low morale in the team, in a way, it's kind of a canary in the coal mine, right? If you're sensing this, you're sensing it on your team, it might be something that says, oof, right? In the next 45 days, are we really going to be able to hit the goals we set out to hit? Or, right, is the morale kind of telling us something here? And the way we think of Soapbox is kind of sitting at the intersection of all of these points. How do we pull goals into the weekly actions and make sure that, those weekly actions are helping adjust morale positively so that you hit the goals that you set out to hit, whether they're, annual, quarterly, biannual, whatever they happen to be. That's kind of where we think of a Soapbox. And so, the content that you've seen from us probably fits in some of these buckets. And certainly the starting point for everyone is what already exists. The quarterly, or sorry, the weekly actions, the meetings that are on the calendar, let's start there. Let's make those better. And then we can kind of flow everything else in. So I'll show you how we accomplish some of that within our teams. I think there are a couple core components to it, just to set the stage, and then I'll jump into the demo. One is we do have a goals product. I don't think everyone on here has seen it. For those that have, you've experienced it. For those that haven't, I'll give you a demo of it. But we do have a core goals product that is really new, but super, super valuable. And the way I think we've built it in saves a lot of time, and I think makes everything much smoother. It's cool. So it gets confetti. We have a really awesome team and one-on-one meeting platform, continuously getting better and ironing out all the kinks and making everything work really, really well there. But you guys are all familiar with that. I'm going to go through some of my favorite features, and particularly I would say some of my favorite features with the Google Suite. Most people here, I believe, are on the Google Suite of Technologies, as are we. So I'll show you how I do some of these weekly things within the Google tech stack. I think everyone will like that. Gets even more confetti. And then the final thing is the insights that come out of doing both of those things, and kind of the habits that you create an app, and how they can kind of teach you things you otherwise wouldn't know. So you might have bumped into a couple of these things, but sometimes seeing the grand picture or hearing the grand picture, you might understand how and when to use them to the full advantage. So I'm excited to show you those as well. That should give you probably a good generic overview of everything that's possible. I'm going to skip over and miss so much stuff, as is always the case. So if you want, a trial at the end of this, or if you want, more time or a demo with someone on the team, feel free to let us know, and we'll obviously reach out for it. But I promised I wouldn't bombard you with slides too much. I'm going to go into the demo. As I said, primarily focusing on the G suite of technologies. And then I've got Slack here as well. So if any of you are using Slack, we use Slack. So I'll show you how all of that interacts as well. With that said, I'm going to load up the demo. If anyone has questions leading up, feel free to take the 30 seconds and type them in, and I'll see if I can weave it into my demo here. 1 second, let me just get things going. All right, this will be my whole desktop here. Keep it simple for me. Okay. And then now Hiba gets to be the full master of ceremonies, because I have no idea what anyone's typing. I can't see. Okay. Okay. So with that all out of the way, maybe there is a way. Hold on. Can you see that? Okay. So never mind.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So I'm going to take you through kind of a mock, demo meeting here. And then I'm going to jump over to Hiba and my one-on-one and just show you how we use it and some of the things I think maybe to strive towards. I'll take you through some of the other core integrations with the Google suite of technology. If you haven't already seen them, I think they're probably worth seeing. And then we'll end up looking at Slack a little bit as well. As always, dump stuff into the chat, dump stuff into the Q&A. Hiba has a couple polls that she's going to drop throughout the conversation. Hopefully make it as valuable as we possibly can for you. Okay, so we're looking at just a demo meeting I've set up. Now, there's this can be a team or a one-on-one meeting. The truth is there's no real difference on the core kind of tech behind things. The majority of the difference is just the content suggestion. So what templates are we suggesting in a one-on-one versus a team meeting? Obviously, a one-on-one can only have 2 people. Team meetings can have many more people. So what I'm going to take you through can be applied in both scenarios. So the first thing I'll do, and I think everyone knows this, we'll just add a couple items here, metrics check, maybe something like that. I'll go into the suggestions and maybe add a couple other things that could be useful for a one-on-one. And I'll use a couple of these. Now, like side thing, not a lot of people see, you can switch. These are all different, right? So different questions for a one-on-one versus a team, different questions for a direct report versus a manager. We've just done a couple of phrasing things to make it a little bit easier for the person viewing this. It's going to default hopefully to the right setup for you, but in case you're ever curious, we will suggest different questions for your direct reports than we would suggest for you. The reason being, it might make sense for you to ask a direct report what makes you excited and motivated to work on a project. That might be a weird thing for a direct report to ask their manager, right? So we've kind of taken some of these things and reworded them to be a little bit more valuable to you. Of course, we've got a ton of templates that you can steal from. And if you haven't otherwise tried it, you can favorite any of the items in any of the templates or conversation starters just by hitting that heart button. What that does is just gives you a quick way, once you've found a couple of your go-to questions, to quickly jump back to it, find it, and reuse it in a variety of other meetings. So super easy to add that. We have maybe some rose petals that pop in, and then all your favorites will be hidden over there. Okay, so we have an agenda here set up with a couple things, maybe to just kick off the meeting. One thing not a lot of people find on their initial visit is sections, or I guess is or are sections. So if you wanted to break up this meeting, and I think one thing that is common in one-on-ones is and even in team meetings is, hey, we're using Soapbox because I have my things I want to talk about, but I really want to invite you to talk about your thing. So one way I do that to just make it a little bit more explicit is I'll create a section that says like Brennan's things. And then I'll create a section at the bottom that says, your things. And that kind of just invites them to fill up this, the space below with what they want to talk about. And of course, when the meeting starts, we can kind of jump wherever we want to jump. But I do that a lot with team meetings as well. I'll label this something like standing agenda, and then, other stuff, other issues that we need to address. And I think that kind of creates this environment where the expectation here is that other people can submit instead of this just being a tool for me, it's kind of a tool for us. Okay, with that out of the way, I think everyone kind of knows how to do those things. When you open it up, you've experienced probably all of these things, but just to share the different components and how we think about it. Comments are really kind of the place to put, in my viewpoint, everything kind of leading up to the meeting. So as you're trying to get additional context out of the employee or out of the person you're having a meeting with, I ask a ton of questions in here. What do you mean by that, right? Et cetera. Sometimes we jot in a couple notes, just reminders for us to bring up in the meeting that might not make sense for other people, but might be really useful for ourselves when we actually do show up to the meeting. That can be back and forth. You can add little reactions to it if you like it. You can add Giphies if you need it, which in certainly this past year, we've all needed it.
I'll also add to that, Brennan, just for me personally too, I love using this feature to do a lot of things asynchronously. So we'll typically try and, close items out before our one-on-one or a team meeting. That way, instead of meeting for a full hour, that meeting gets dwindled down to 30 minutes. And like, if something's blocking, you can kind of tackle that, a week in advance instead of waiting 2 weeks until that one-on-one or that team meeting. And so for me, like, this has been a huge thing in terms of asynchronous working.
And yeah, 100% agree, right? Like, and in fact, a couple of customers this past week told me the same thing. They'll, a meeting will get canceled, but there's blockers on the agenda, and they tend to just chat back and forth in the kind of side chat here, come to a resolution, mark it as a summary, and the next time they have that meeting, they can kind of catch everyone else up if need be. But that's definitely how we view it. What's the side if you pretend you're in a meeting room, what's the side conversation that's being whispered? You can kind of have that in this little sidebar here. And of course, the best as possible, I think, let's try to understand what are the problems that exist and spend the time in the meeting deciding on the solution versus, to spending the time in the meeting uncovering what the problems are, right? And that's how we kind of see comments. Over here, kind of subtle, is just an area for the description. And so the item title, I think of as like a subject line. The description I kind of think of as like a body to the email. So what is the additional context that you might want to get out or that people might need to know? So you can write a little paragraph here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, hit enter and it will submit it. Secret things that probably shouldn't be secret. Obviously, we're working on some of these. Two things that I would love all of you to know. One is if you haven't already figured it out, you can hit shift enter and add multiple lines, which obviously is helpful when you're adding that extra context behind an item. And the other thing is if you've ever experienced Markdown, which is what's available in Slack and GitHub and a whole bunch of other products, there's a way of kind of adding some rich text to each of these items. So for example, if you have your metrics tech, you can add bulleted lists just by doing dashes. And when you hit enter, they will become kind of rich text bulleted lists. But you can add a whole lot of other things, including lines, numbered lists, more lines. And if you wanted to, you could even add subheadings, depending on how deep you wanted to go, on that context. So add as much content you want in there. Two things I think for you to know is you can do some rich text with Markdown, and shift enter is how you get a new line. Sometimes that trips people up. but as much as you want to put in there, you can put in there. And like I said, I kind of think as the title of the item is like the subject of an email, and the description almost as the body of the email. So what's the meat that you want people to read before they kind of jump into the conversation chat area, or the summary where you get to kind of make that call or decision. So I hope that makes sense. As we move down here, summaries, the way I view this is kind of the official record of notes, right? So after you've had the discussion, or while you've had your discussion, what's the outcome of that discussion? What did we decide? What did we say? What did we, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in some cases, if this might be a bad item here, metrics check, you could say metrics are good. Look into a few areas, hit enter. And the way we think about it is once the summary has been written, that item is done, right? That's the conclusion of the item. The notes have been taken. You've summarized it there. So we do, to save you a little bit of time, we automatically close that item for you. And the basics there are closed items when you hit the finish meeting button are going to get archived. Items that aren't closed yet are going to remain for your next meeting. So they kind of automatically roll over. Now, if you're like, hold on a second, Soapbox, I'm not done with that, you can uncheck it. So you just click the uncheck button. It will reopen itself back up. You should be good to go. You're fine. You can kind of do everything else that you wanted to do. I hope that makes sense. I saw a couple chats pop in or something pop in. And then from kind of beyond there, the next piece is next steps. So, maybe the metrics are good. You want to look into a few areas. What do you want to, what are the areas you want to look into? If you've said something or someone's committed to doing something in the room or on the meeting or on the Zoom call, next steps are the place to document this. And like everything else in Soapbox, this is live and collaborative. So other people can be doing this. It doesn't always have to be you. You could be maybe dictating and assigning a role to someone to document some of these things. I know for me in my one-on-ones, I try to get my direct reports to do most of that work. I think it helps them take more ownership of the meeting. And I think the key part of them taking ownership of the meeting is they get to manage up a little bit better. And I'll show you how Hiba does a really, really good job of that in a second. Okay, but so say, let's pretend here metrics were bad. And we wanted to look into a few areas. Let's say, I have to do something for it. So what you could do is, dive into data, right? That could be my next step there. Now, what we found is like a lot of people in the meeting will kind of recap the next step in natural language. So we've done a couple little shortcuts for you, just for everyone to be aware of here. I can dive into data, choose my due date, and assign it to whoever needs to do it. I can also just write the same thing we would say, Brennan to dive into data by Monday, right? And when I hit enter, it's going to assign it to me. That's a photo of my dog. And it's going to pick Monday. So there's a little bit of natural language intelligence going on there that knows, hey, Brennan's a person in the meeting. Let's assign it to him. And, Monday is March 8th. So let's assign it to March 8th. And that saves you, maybe 15 seconds, but it saves you probably a little bit more of getting distracted. A common thing people ask is, Brennan, how come I can't assign 2 people to a next step? And we've kind of taken a stance on this. It's based on the principle of directly responsible individual. If you guys want to, we might have written about it on our blog, but it's kind of a well-documented idea. And the kind of point is, when the accountabilities and responsibilities get a little bit murky on who's supposed to do what, excuses can creep in. And so to avoid that, the goal is to always have one individual person directly responsible for getting something done or for an area of the business. So we don't let you have multiple people assigned to a next step. Sometimes multiple people have to do the same next step. And so if that's the case, if like 2 people have to do 2 things separately, we do have a really top secret thing I could do, who's actually in this with me? I don't think maybe I'll show you this with Hiba, but I could write Brennan and Hiba. Hiba's not in this meeting, but to do something, right? And then what we'll actually do is we'll split that out into 2 next steps, assign me to one and Hiba to another one. I'll show you that in a second. So I hope that makes sense. Of course, I can check off those next steps. Once I check off all the next steps, we're going to automatically close that item. Again, we're trying to like come up with a workflow here that saves you some time. Of course, if you disagree with that, you can always uncheck it. And that means it's not done. You're going to talk about it at your next meeting. Make sense so far? I hope. Okay, cool. I will check all of these off. I'm going to hit finish meeting. And by default, we're choosing today's date. You can always change it. But by default, we're going to save things under today's date. The basics here, really simple. Anything with a check mark beside it is going to get archived into the past. Anything without a check mark is going to roll over to our next meeting to be talked about next time. And the email is going to send the notes out to everyone. So there's kind of no excuses. And the last thing is we're going to ask a question. This question might be different than the question that you're used to seeing. So if that's the case, just know that you can change this question. Often what I do, and I'll show you that here, it's actually in your settings. So if you go on a per meeting basis into agenda settings, you can change the question that happens at the end of your meeting or turn it off. I tend to ask different questions depending on the meeting type. The default is how would you rate this meeting? But I tend to go on team meetings and ask about our current performance level as a team. And it's just stoplight kind of check in. So green, yellow, red. Honestly, I find it really helpful for me to document my own feelings at the end of a team meeting to say, you know, how do I really feel about our performance towards our goals, right? And even just doing that myself, I get a lot of value out of it. Whereas depending on the one-on-one, I might think about, you know, performance level, if we're kind of managing to a particular performance track, or progress to goals, or often I'll use outlook for the future. And this kind of gets a little bit at some of the morale pieces. So better, the same, or worse, as we think about, you know, the next little bit together, do we feel like things are going to get better at work or things are going to get worse at work? And that's kind of like the, you know, the long-term forecast of things. And so I like to track that and then look back over time as I scroll through some of my past meetings. Things were getting better for a bit. They kind of stalled out. Things got worse. You know, why did they get worse? And just ways for me to, you know, particularly in one-on-ones, to, you know, understand where people are at. Cool so far. Hiba, anything to add?
No, I think you've got it. I think you're
Cool.
nailing it.
All right. You would have all seen this email come in, but that's basically what it looks like. So you get all of those next steps popping in. So I think the key thing is, like, when your notes are taken, take a quick look at your agenda. Anything with a check mark, hit finish meeting. It's going to get archived into the past over here. Anything without it will roll forward. There's kind of one exception to that, and that's if you have an item that's set as recurring. Recurring items are basically standing agenda items. It means you're going to talk about them every single week. I can show you some real examples of that. Or you'll see it here. It will have a little like recycling icon just in that list view. And so if you have a standing agenda, every single time you meet, you want to talk about metrics, you can add that in there. And when you finish the meeting, it will magically kind of reset and come back fresh for you to take more notes on or have other conversations about. One quick thing I want to share for the Googlers here is attachments. So you might be used to doing things like, let me see, I've got a lot of like different docs. You might be used to attachments as like files. So you can upload real files if you want to. But I think more common for us are things like our Google Docs. So these are our metrics here. And Google Docs aren't really files, so they're kind of hard to attach. Often what we do is we'll attach a Google Doc as a link. And I would say most common, we just paste the link in the chat and we, you know, hit enter. So any links in the chat will show up basically as attachments for people to kind of peruse a little bit later on, or files that are in a way being discussed. The one thing I think that's interesting about Google Docs is we have a preview built in. So if I say this is our tracker, metrics tracker, right? Metrics tracker. Let me get rid of this one. So this is, I mean, genuinely how we use it. I can show you some examples here, but I can click this and open it up in a separate tab like normal. But if I wanted to preview it in app, I can just click the attachment there. I get the full preview. This is our tracker from 2020. Here on the sidebar, I have our comments, so I can go back and forth and chat with the team. I can add the summaries. I can add the next steps. We can kind of run the meeting while viewing this document without having to switch tabs and do all those things. And then just hit the back button and I'm back to the agenda. So if you're like me and you're bombarded with Google Docs all day, and Google Drive is completely unorganized and it's impossible to find the doc that you want, one of the things Hiba does a really good job of is, add an item to our one-on-one, that she needs feedback on a particular doc. She attaches the Google Doc to it. And that serves as a really easy, convenient place for me to both, know where to go and where to find things. But then also, we know we're going to talk about it. I know I'm going to get feedback on it. It's not going to get buried in my inbox or buried in Google Drive somewhere. So something for folks to try out if they haven't already.
Yeah, and something like that's just made it so easy for me to manage up, because I've tried so many different things with Brennan to see what's going to work. Like, here's my project management tool and here's this other thing, and it doesn't really stick. So at least knowing that he lives in Soapbox, I can just add a next step, add the link, and I always get a response, and that's awesome. So for me, it just makes it really easy to manage up and get his feedback ASAP. And that's just what works for us.
Awesome. A couple quick things, then I'm going to show you just other Google integrations. But I believe I added a next step for myself. We archived it into the past meetings. This next steps tab is going to pull all the uncompleted next steps out of all your past meetings, all your future meetings, show it here. I can complete it. And if you forgot to assign someone, you're not going to lose it. It will be there and you can go and reassign those things in the future. Past meetings tab, pretty self-explanatory, everything that's there. Really quickly, two areas. One is the insights tab. And this is on a per meeting basis. But the way I kind of see this is this will help you discover some of your blind spots, particularly helpful, I would say, in one-on-ones when you're trying to have a more balanced discussion about work and life in a lot of ways, career development. You'll see what you have been talking about. And so might not be noticeable, but when you add an item, say you talk about metrics, or say you want to talk about your future plans at home or something like that. Or if you're going in and adding one of these items from from our suggestion bank, what we're doing in the background is we're automatically classifying those into our little engagement framework here, whether it's about work, motivation, growth, or communication. Something that is described here but not known is you can reclassify these, and that will actually train the machine learning to get better over time. And that's specific to your community. So if you have, acronyms that you use at work that might be specific to your company, or values that you have at work that might be specific to your company, you can kind of just reclassify things and train the AI for your company, and it will get smarter, and you'll have to do it less and less over time. But you can see here we've classified that as work. This one is work, communication, and this one is work and motivation. Of course, I can make that a little bit stronger by just choosing the one that I think is accurate. When I go back over to the meetings, the insights area, work continues to kind of dominate, but I can kind of push things out by, adding a couple things about motivation. So if I do this, have those add to our agenda, and come back, you'll see we've kind of thickened the conversation. I don't think any particular meeting has to be perfectly balanced, but I think when you look at the overall view of you and a person in a one-on-one, you're going to want to make sure you're somewhat balanced. We also serve these up when you hit that finish button. So I'll give you just a quick example here, and I'll skip this. Based on your conversations, you should discuss growth or motivation. So I click that, and it's going to filter right to the right area for me to just pick a couple things that could help. One thing I hear often from customers is using our suggested content and then blaming Soapbox. So if you want to have an awkward conversation, or if you're not sure if you should bring something up, take a look through those questions, add them to the agenda. And when the time comes, it's very common for people to say, listen, I don't know, right? But Soapbox told me I should talk about this, so let's just try it. I've been, hearing for forever that some of the most valuable conversations have kind of come out of little things like that. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to quickly cover goals. I don't think a lot of people have seen that, and then I'll jump to Hiba and my one-on-one here. So goals is new. I think there's two core things that I think are really valuable for everyone here to know. One is that I think every meeting should have a goal. If it's a one-on-one meeting, your goals are probably more career, professional, personal development related. And whether that's annual or quarterly, I think you should be working towards something. And teams obviously should have a goal. If you have a meeting that doesn't necessarily have a goal, it might not be the best meeting to have on a recurring basis. It might be something that you're just having until a project's complete, but at the same time, most projects have goals. It might be something where you think about, there are other ways of accomplishing this, or maybe should we come up with a goal? Should we add an item on our agenda that says, what are we all trying to get out of this meeting? And let's just be clear and explicit about it. And then we can kind of document those things in really nice ways. But let me take you through the goals area. And for those who don't have it, goals is a part of our business package. The simplest way maybe of describing the price difference is an additional $4 a user a month on business. There is a trial available if you guys do want to check this out. We'll add a poll or something at the end of the webinar. So goals, really simple. Every meeting can have a goal. Creating a goal, really easy. Click the big button. You can choose any emoji. Might be support conversations are 100% positive. And the way we've kind of structured these is to be based on OKRs, but we're not explicitly forcing you to follow that. We've used pretty normal language. But the title here, I kind of think of that as the objective. You can go in and describe the goal. The same things apply. If you want to use that markdown, you can and describe it in its fullest. And the milestones are basically key results. So you can describe those milestones, all you want, or those key results all you want here. And of course, drag and drop, rearrange. Comment section works just like it does on the other area. I use this a lot when we're brainstorming what the goals should be and why they should be this, and documenting, different decisions on words, as well as celebrating success when the time comes to, celebrate with someone. They've checked off a couple things. You can kind of go in there and just document, the emotions that you have. Of course, as you complete some of those milestones, you can check those off, and you'll get a really nice overview of your progression towards those goals. I should set a target date. Let's make this one June, right? And so you can kind of see, all right, where are we at? The other piece, I guess the first piece I think that's really important to know about Soapbox is we've actually built in the largest library of goal examples on the entire internet into our app. So if you click the suggestions, very similar to the question suggestions, you can open up goals and you'll see basically every single role, at least in technology, split up into categories and functions. If you're managing engineering managers for the first time, or if you're managing, say a DevOps person for the first time, you've never done it before, you don't know what that is, or growth marketing manager, right? These are real OKRs and goals submitted by other companies. So they're not perfect, but they are battle tested. And what's great about it is you can just steal them, open it up, make the changes that you want to make, kind of brainstorm and use that as inspiration with your team. I'll tell you, like, I use this a lot. As someone who's back to back in meetings and busy with a whole bunch of other things, I often go to the team and say, as individuals, like, hey, here are the 4 ways I think you need to improve, and the 4 things, the 4 opportunities we have as a team or as a function. Please go into the largest library of goal examples on the entire intranet built into this app, and just pick like 15 ways that you think might be helpful, and obviously add your own. And then what we're going to do over our next maybe one-on-one or couple one-on-ones is we're going to narrow that down to 3, right? So we're going to use it as a jumping off point, and then document some of the things that are inspiring us and feel right. And ultimately, we're probably going to build our own, but that kind of takes the onus off of me to come up with, the starting point. I'm able to, open this up, or people are able to open this up and say, you know what, I'm particularly want to focus on my personal development. Well, here's ways of doing that, right? And so I can kind of coach ways of making these goals better versus what should the goals be. Use it all the time. Certainly been helpful. The second thing, before I jump in, spend maybe the last 15 minutes on real examples, is this little toggle here, show goals on agenda. This is like the most powerful toggle probably in Soapbox. Just an on or off. It does something really, really simple, which is if you want this goal to appear on your agenda, it will force it to the top. And it's a really simple stat. But if you talk about your goals every single time you meet, and the team knows that you're going to bring it up, you're going to hold them accountable to it, you're 95% more likely to actually hit your goals. Basically, it boils down to a core human problem. We're terrible at remembering things. We're terrible at holding each other accountable to things. So the app is not only helpful in helping you come up with what your goals are, but also enforcing them to the top of your agenda. So you can see here, there's a magic item that's been added to the top of the agenda with our goals showing up there, with our progress towards it. And of course, I can open these up, make more progress. And it's repeating just like the other standing agenda items. So as you document your next steps, or you document your blockers, or you document your progress towards it, you can hit save, it'll reset for your next meeting. You'll be able to continually have these check-ins on your goals. So I think with all of that said, maybe what I'll do is I'll open up Hiba's agenda here, and you can see 2 things. I think one thing that's important is how many times you see Hiba's face versus my face. This is probably something that I don't even talk to Hiba about, but this is what I want to see, right? It's her one-on-one. This is her meeting. This is her time with me dedicated to whatever, we need to talk about. We can jump in and do all that stuff. So, this is what Hiba's decided. This is the organization that's Hiba's decided here. And when I kind of expand it out, you can see the goals that she's working on. You can see the next steps that are happening, and you'll see a lot of them are me. I'll show you the next steps tab. But for the most part, she's going in there and holding me accountable to the things I'm committing to in the meeting. When I go over to next steps here, you'll see how many I have. So I've got to do a couple things, and people I've got to talk to, and promises I've made to her. She's going to hold me to it. And she's got a couple other things that she's holding herself accountable, and then just other stuff that we want to do, but maybe doesn't need to be, assigned to anyone at the moment. Goals, like I mentioned, you can see a couple goals that we've completed, we feel really good about, and then a couple other things that we want to accomplish. For the most part, what I'll say here, I'll take a pause. I'm actually going to open up my calendar. This is primarily how I interact actually with him. I'm going to go a little bit into the future here. So for the most part, I'm in my calendar, I'm back to back on a particular day. And I think about something with Hiba and I go, oh, I got to bring that up. I'll open up the agenda. And this is powered by our Chrome extension. So I'll open it up within my calendar. I'll see everything here. I can add the stuff I want to add. I can add a comment if I wanted to add a comment on it. Whatever it happens to be, it'll be there. For Hiba in particular, kind of the other powerful thing is all of my next steps that she's assigning to me are going to show up on a particular day that it's due. So as I think about my week, as I flip between the different weeks, here are the next steps I've committed to across all of my meetings. I can make sure I'm staying on top of them. In this case, we have that fake demo item. I can also check it off, be done with it, get the confetti bomb, feel a little bit of bliss, and then move on to the other chaos that I have to accomplish throughout my day. If I ever see something on the internet that's marketing related, and Hiba will tell you to do this a lot, I can open up this little soapbox icon here, click Hiba, and just document that thing that I saw. And I know we're going to talk about it the next Monday that we meet. And the last thing is we're virtual. So this might break Zoom, but when we do meet, we meet on Google Meet. And so when I join that Google Meet, once this loads up here, the powerful thing is Soapbox is connected. It's going to open up. I'm able to look at her, talk to her. She's able to do the same thing. And Soapbox is going to show up along the side here. We can talk about our goals. We can talk about those things. We can document those things, feel really good about it. And when we hang up, we get a prompt to rate, finish our meeting, and move on to the next one. So kind of in the flow of work, after that setup is done, we just get that natural, oh yeah, we haven't talked about goals, right? In a couple of days, like, how are we progressing? Did we make any movements on it? Things like that. And same with team meetings, right? So that's all in there. That's probably a huge chunk of what I wanted to show you. There's probably like 15 million other things, but just to show you, some of the team meetings, we have 7 members on this one, our standing agenda, some other things below. We work, the exact same way with team meetings as we would with one-on-ones. But I'll pause there, 10 minutes for questions, answers. I saw bubbles pop up and go flying. And I'll pass the mic back over to Hiba.
So we have one question, and Brennan, I'm not sure if you use Asana, but the question was, oh, it just disappeared.
Was revoked.
I will find it. So what do you guys use for task management and the follow-up process with it? Are you linking to something like Jira, Trello, Asana? And so, I guess from my perspective, we don't really use project management at this point, just because, at least on the marketing side, mainly because I'm a team of one and Brennan is the extension of marketing. So everything is really easy to manage through Soapbox. But in the past, using Asana when we were a bigger marketing team, the Chrome extension was really great for that. And Brennan, I'll hand it over.
Yeah, I think there's like 2 things. So, historically, I feel like I've used all the tools. So Asana has definitely been one on marketing that we've used. With the Chrome extension, your next steps will show up. So there's like 2 things I'll say about these tools. So one is for Asana and Todoist. If you have the Chrome extension, you open up, say, your inbox here, or I don't know, my tasks. Your next steps from Soapbox with this Chrome extension will show up in there. Now they're not directly copied over in this particular case. This is just them showing up. So that, while I'm thinking about all the other stuff I have to do at work, I can view it. We do have a Zapier integration. So if there is a next step assigned to you within Soapbox, you can zap it to Todoist, or you can zap it to Asana, or you can zap it to Trello or something like that. The way to set that up, we have a support doc for you can write in, but you can also click, your settings. And it'll be just this API key. You can copy and use that to do a whole bunch of stuff. Everything we do in an app is based off our API. So you can do a whole bunch of stuff, but the default ones configured are zapping next steps between different places. Now, what I want to just make sure I address is we use Jira in here like crazy. The whole dev team, the whole engineering team, it's by far the largest team at our company uses Jira like crazy. And because of that, I am with you on the question, right? Like if in a lot of cases, if it's not in Jira, it's hard for a lot of the individual contributors to remember to do it. Obviously, I think the Chrome extension is very helpful for those people. And there are ways of kind of deploying the Chrome extension to all users at your company. But, in some cases, some individual contributors don't really check their calendar very often, right? And so, certainly the creatives, devs and designers are less frequently in meetings. And so, that's less part of their workflow, and Jira and tools like, Asana are more part of their workflow. So definitely on the list of things to do is just a really killer integration, two-way integration to all of the tools mentioned. The way we're thinking about it, and you can kind of jump in the comments and say that's stupid or that's awesome. But the way we're thinking about it is in the next steps tab, just having a little integrations button up here that lets you choose two-way sync to Asana, what project within Asana, click set up, and that would do both, in this case, Hiba and me. If it was, say, our product weekly sync, going over to next steps, hey, I want a two-way sync with Jira on this board or this epic or this project in Jira. All these people map up properly. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. Rest assured that will come because we need it as well. But at the same time, for those who are doing meetings, they tend to just see the next steps in their calendar for the most part so far. Yeah, two-way sync. Two-way. So Zapier currently does a two-way sync. So if you check it off in Jira, it would check off in Soapbox. There's a couple of people who use that at Soapbox now. The only caveat with Zapier is it currently is you have to set it up on a per user basis. It's not like an org-wide basis. There's partially two reasons for that, Justin. And also curious for your feedback here is for the most part, to do and assign things on behalf of other users, you might need to actually connect Soapbox to your Jira org as a whole. And the permissions for that are in some cases a little extreme. And so seems like a pretty hefty button for folks to click. And so we want to make sure we're doing that right and earning your trust.